Hello, my name is Dr. Vicky Cleak and I'm a consultant psychiatrist with a special interest in adult ADHD, and today I'm going to be looking at all of the difficulties that a woman might experience if they have a diagnosis of ADHD. So today I'm going to talk through all of the functional deficits that people with ADHD experience. I know that there is a lot of stuff on social media, and a lot of people might feel that thinking about and talking about the deficits of ADHD is unhelpful, because sure, we know that there are some aspects of ADHD that are very beneficial, such as the high energy levels, the drive, not holding grudges, risk taking. There are lots of really positive things that someone with ADHD has if those strengths are worked to and the person has found the right job, the right partner. However, equally, I know from my own experience and what my patients tell me is that they need to be validated for the difficulties they've experienced during their life. And to do that, we have to explain and make clear that the difficulties they have experienced are part of the ADHD, and then we can specifically target those difficulties that a person has in terms of non-medication management options that are most helpful. But also we have got some difficulties that we can measure change and improvement from in terms of medication if you want to try medication. So this is not about being negative, it's about being realistic, and I just want you to know that I'm also not going to be focusing on all the particular options that we can use to help with all of these individual difficulties, but there are many. But we don't have time to talk about those things today. We are just going to focus on the validation of your experience and maybe even help you think about some difficulties that you've had in the past that you'd never realised were down to your ADHD, because I think that's a really helpful starting point. So anyone with ADHD will tell you that they may have been told and shown what they need to do. They may have been reminded of the fact that they've got an appointment that's outside of their normal schedule or routine, but they repeatedly forget that kind of thing. People with ADHD know what to do. They're not stupid, but they just can't seem to do it. And that's because they've got a number of differences in their brain to those without ADHD, which means that some of these things are quite hard to do. Not impossible, and in fact, with really good structural support and placing their skills in jobs and environments where those strengths can really shine, they may not even fit the criteria for ADHD in terms of functional impairment, but they will still be making a lot of efforts in multiple aspects of their life if they've got ADHD to be able to function. The other thing I am not going to do is split this up into the classic 9 symptoms of attention deficit, 9 symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity. And the reason for that is because although those are the criteria by which you make a diagnosis, this is not what this module is about. But also, I do think that many of the difficulties listed on those criteria and found on the ASRS 18 screening tool for ADHD, I think have overlap in terms of their underlying reasons for why people experience those difficulties. Hopefully that will become apparent as we go through this too. So there are 3 types of ADHD according to the DSM and ICD-10 criteria, which is the Bible research book for psychiatry. And that means that somebody might fit the criteria for attention deficit only and not have any hyperactive or impulsivity symptoms, or they fit the criteria only for hyperactivity and impulsivity, or they have a mix of both. The mix of both is more common. In my experience, most people actually have significant symptoms of both if you know where to look and what to ask. For example, you may not have physical hyperactivity anymore, but actually have real hyperactivity of your thoughts, but that is not captured anywhere in the criteria. So when a person has ADHD with attention problems particularly, they make careless mistakes, they don't pay attention for long because their attention is flitting from what's going on around them, what they can hear, what they can see, any movement that goes on, but also about what's going on in their mind as well. So if you've got a task that's not particularly interesting to do, and you might find that your mind starts wandering onto a whole load of jobs you've got to do, or reminders to pick your children up after school and have you check the time. As you know, people with ADHD often have multiple trains of thought going through their head at the same time, and these can be exceedingly distracting. If that's going on, that can make it very difficult for you to listen to others, and it's not so much the listening, but it's actually hearing. So your partner will repeatedly have to tell you information that they swear they've told you before and you just can't remember, and that's because you weren't paying attention in the first place. Those with ADHD often have difficulty completing tasks. So you start the washing up or start emptying the dishwasher, but you get distracted by a thought that you haven't ordered something on your Waitrose online and the time's going to go and you're going to forget and you need to do it immediately. So you go off and do that, and then you forget that you're in the middle of emptying the dishwasher, and when your partner comes home and finds the dishwasher half emptied and cupboards open perhaps, then they'll be wondering, what's gone on. So difficulty completing tasks, difficulty organising and prioritising tasks. So again, when I talk to my patients, what tends to happen is they may get quite rigid about their schedule of their day. They know what's going on, but if another task gets laid upon them that they weren't expecting, it can be very difficult to hold that all in mind, reorder things in ways to make it efficient and work for them, and that can overwhelm and shut down, really, whether that's obvious or not. And that's because holding all these different concepts in your mind when you've got lots of other things going on in your mind or externally around that you can't switch off to can make it very difficult to stick with that thought of how you're going to prioritise. So that's why writing things down, having it laid out on a bit of paper can be really helpful, because your mind can be distracted, but you've still got all the information there to fit back to. If you're prioritising activity, you need to know how long tasks are going to take to do. You need to know, if you're trying to manage your time, how is the best way to make that efficient. And that can be quite tricky for those with ADHD who have this feeling that all tasks are equally important, equally need to be done that day, and thus they can struggle to do that. Well, actually, what can be left over to the next day? And I think there are several reasons for that. I think there's the feeling that you can't hold all those things in your brain at the same time, worries about forgetting tasks, worries about more tasks coming your way and having to manage that in your mind. So I think there's lots of reasons why people with ADHD struggle to prioritise. But again, it's not because they don't know what to do, it's just that they can't do it. Losing things. So again, if you've not paid attention, you just put your keys down somewhere, your coat down somewhere else, and you haven't specifically paid clear attention to that, then you're not going to remember where your keys are and where your coat is. And that's why, again, lots of women with ADHD who are managing to function have discovered that they need to always put the keys in the same place as a routine. They have things out on the side to prompt them that they need to remember to do something. And if their husband then tidies that away, that can be a problem. They've lost it, but actually they kind of haven't. And forgetfulness, again, if you're not paying attention in the first place, you haven't put that information into your working memory, then it's never going to get into your longer term memory and never going to remember. And that's why, one of the strategies for managing ADHD is to have some form of diary and to keep that with reminders. Time management difficulties. So we do know actually from research that those people who have not got enough dopamine in certain areas of their brain do have a different sense of time to everybody else. So for them, time has essentially slowed down. So they think they've got more time than they actually have. So that's the underestimating time. One of the ways to address that is to practice explicitly saying how long you think a task is going to take and then recording whether that is the case. The other thing to do is just add an extra 10 minutes onto your day and to any deadlines by moving your clocks so that you've got some wriggle room, and that can be quite helpful. Lateness, so very common with people because they have firstly underestimated the time it takes to get from A to B, but also forgetfulness can lead to lateness. If someone with ADHD thinks they've got more time than they actually have, on the way out, they may say, I've got an extra 5 minutes, I'm just going to stack the dishwasher. So they stack the dishwasher and then find that they can't find the dishwasher tablets. So they start rummaging around in the cupboard. Then they realise the cupboard's a mess. So they think, oh my God, I'm just going to quickly tidy the cupboard, and I have completely forgotten that they are on track to get somewhere for a certain time. So this is what can happen with lateness. Missing appointments and double booking, again, very common. Double booking can occur because you've forgotten you made the appointment in the first place, or that you had something else on. And then missed appointments, again, because you haven't been reminded and it's out of your normal routine. That's when there can be particular difficulties. So you might want to red flag things that are outside of your normal routine. So school holidays for a mother can be very difficult because time is different. So many people with ADHD struggle with getting tasks started and also just getting started in the day. So getting up late because they just can't just give it another minute, give it another minute, I'll get up soon. They just don't seem to have the drive to get out of bed. And there are various tips and tricks you can do to manage that, like having your alarm clock on the other side of the bedroom or counting down from 5 to 0. But of course, getting up late might also be because you've got an associated sleep disorder like delayed sleep phase syndrome, which is common in those with ADHD, but also because you might have been up much later at night and not had enough sleep because you were hyper focused on something other task, which meant you lost an extra 2 hours that you should have really had in bed. Those people with ADHD don't usually have a problem getting started with tasks they are excited about or interested in. At that point, they get hyper-focused and it's hard for them to balance that wish and drive with other things. It's the problem with the regulation, the sticky pedal, if you like, of their motivation and drive. But for a task that's really dull and boring, like doing your tax return, then often it's very difficult for a person with ADHD to get started with that task until it's at the point of deadline. And that's because is just not enough dopamine going on to get them round to it. However, the person with ADHD will really feel it. It will be a burden on their shoulders until it is done. And so, it's a really good idea to get these things done as soon as you've got them. So, as soon as you've got your tax deadline, you just do it the next day can be really helpful. And it can be helpful to get that started with a buddy, with your partner standing over you, or with a reward at the end of finishing it and getting it in. And these are little things that can just push you over the line to get started on a boring task. In terms of starting essays or pieces of written work, we're really lucky nowadays with AI, because actually I think there is a lot that ChatGPT or equivalent can really do to enable those with ADHD to overcome some of these difficulties. So you can put something into ChatGPT that just gives you the first line of what you need to do, or gives you a framework of some boring report thing that you need to do. So I would really advise those with ADHD with these kind of difficulties to have an experiment and see whether ChatGPT can help. Sort of routine tasks I've mentioned about sort of emptying the dishwasher, cleaning the shower. There are plenty of these putting the bins out, plenty of these routine jobs that as an adult you have to do, but are incredibly mind-numbingly boring and repetitive. Those with ADHD really struggle to do it if they don't enjoy them. And that can extend to things like having a shower, cooking properly, shopping for food, all these things. So it's about smart ways to make them either more interesting, to outsource that work. So if you've got a partner, they can take on the jobs that you find particularly grinding, and you can do the jobs that you find slightly more interesting, or outsourcing those things to somebody else that you pay, for example, an accountant or a cleaner, or sharing those tasks with someone else, because that makes it more fun. If you've got children, you might want to bring them into it, make a game out of it. Whatever it takes to make those difficult, boring but important adulting tasks manageable for you. What happens if you don't do them is they start building up, then it causes more clutter in your house, more clutter in your mind, and leads to overwhelm and shutdown. So distractibility, the external things that stop you from paying attention. You can be distracted by internal thoughts, but by external stimuli as well. It can be really challenging for a person with ADHD to go out for dinner with the family and be mindful and stay in the moment of what's going on the table, rather than being distracted by the conversations going on around them, which they're earwigging into, or thinking about something on television that they really wished that they had videoed, or whatever it is. All of these external stimuli, internal thoughts, are, for someone with ADHD, very hard to tune out of, and can really impact your relationship with others and your functional ability. Physical hyperactivity tends to get better, improve over time from childhood to adulthood. But in my experience, there is often a significant mental hyperactivity that persists. So you can't slow down, switch off very easily unless you're hyper-focused on something. And obviously, if you remain hyperactive as you get older and older, and you need to keep moving, then that might keep you fitter for longer. But if you become physically unwell for whatever reason, then a person may really struggle with that. I've also mentioned the verbal hyperactivity. So we all know people that just won't stop talking, and that can be quite a common thing with ADHD, particularly in women, because that's a more acceptable trait to have than perhaps in men, because women are more social, they like talking to each other. But obviously, if you're talking a lot, you're not listening, and so that can really impair relationships. And for some people, that can feel like a bit of a barrage as well. People can end up avoiding that person because they, don't give space to other people socially. Having someone who talks a lot in the workplace can be very distracting for other people and really impact productivity of other people as well. Equally, I've had a couple of patients who, when they were much younger, realised that this was an issue, who found that the best way of managing this was just to stay quiet and withdrawn all the time. And that is also an understandable way of managing the verbal hyperactivity, but maybe isn't so functional. So impulsivity, we can have impulsivity in action, but impulsivity in speech as well. So those with ADHD may talk over others, they may interrupt others in the middle of conversations. That's often because they can't stop and think it has to come out of their mouth immediately, but it also might be because they're worried about forgetting their point, and so they say the point immediately. So impulsivity in speech, but also in action. So, can you wait at the traffic lights? Can you stand at the traffic lights if you're walking and wait until the traffic lights turn green? Or will you, if it's for an extended period of time, and of course people with ADHD are often very impatient, will you have to cross the road rather than wait? Do you have problems if driving, waiting at traffic lights? Again, do you run the lights? What about being stuck behind someone on a windy road, knowing that there's a junction coming up? Will you overtake them at a point in time, or will you be able to wait the extra mile until perhaps you've got to a dual carriageway or whatever? And some of those actions, impulsive actions, can be dangerous. Will you pay extra money for an item to be delivered same day? Will you book a holiday without having consulted your partner because there's just that drive to get it done, finished, moving on to the next thing? So you can see how the impulsivity trait can actually be really significantly impairing, both socially but also financially. Emotional regulation. So I put this in because although it's not a formal trait for a diagnosis of ADHD, it is definitely a significant component of ADHD. Many patients with ADHD really struggle with their emotions. They describe strong, intense frustration, for example, if they have to wait or there are barriers in their way, or they get super excited, a bit over the top when things are going really, really well. And that is sort of more than the average person. And for the average person, it can seem a bit intense. Often people with ADHD are described as mercurial, passionate. Those are quite common words used to really signpost that this person has got strong emotions that they can't keep inside. Everyone can read the emotion on your body and what you say, even when you walk in the room, in terms of your posture. Equally, when a person with ADHD gets a knockback, they can feel it very, very strongly. And in my experience, it's not just head thought, it's a real, or emotional thought, it's a real visceral feeling of being rejected or excluded or let down. The emotion can be so intense that they just can't shake it off to focus on anything else. I've also seen some people with ADHD, when they start thinking about times in the past when they have felt rejected, extremely upset, it takes them immediately back to those very strong, intense emotions. Whereas for most people, thinking about a situation where they might initially have felt emotionally quite strong about, that emotional strength has dissipated, and they will mentally know, that the person did X, Y, and Z and that upset them, but they won't feel the physical component, whereas people with ADHD, in my experience, often do. Other difficulties that are really common in those with ADHD, I've mentioned sleep already. There's the difficulty getting off to sleep because you've got so many thoughts going through your head, you can't quieten your mind, but there may also be associated sleep disorders. We're beginning to realise there's a connection with hypermobility. Many people with ADHD are hypermobile, which can lead to all sorts of other physical and health problems. Premenstrual dysphoria, so many girls with ADHD, because there is a connection between your estrogen receptors and dopamine, those with ADHD often find that their ADHD symptoms get worse premenstrually, that week premenstrually, as well as postnatally and at perimenopause, and that can include that emotional dysregulation getting more severe. Those people with ADHD are much more likely to be addicted to substances than those without, often because they're self-medicating. And then overeating, so often ADHD people tend to be snackers, and because they are often awake later, they might eat later as well, and those things are all associated with putting on weight and obesity. So in summary, having a diagnosis of ADHD means that there are many aspects of it that are challenging for everyday functioning. Everybody will have their own illness signature of the ADHD, where in their life at a particular point in time there are particular things that they struggle with, and part of the assessment when you go for an ADHD assessment and treatment is to identify which of those difficulties are most impairing and to tackle those first together. And before we end, this is a good time to look at the Women's Guide to ADHD Mastery, which is available for free from my website drvickycleak.co.uk, and in it you can find a wheel of executive functioning as well as an executive functioning skills quiz to help you identify your own strengths and weaknesses, which can help start a conversation with your clinician about the areas you would like to tackle first. I really hope you found this module useful, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye bye for now, and thank you for watching.